All right, good morning. Our speaker today, and I'll get your question later. Our speaker today is William Castro. He comes to us all the way from Dade County, Florida, which I think they now changed the name to Miami-Dade County so they could make sure they could find it. And without any further introduction, I'll let him introduce himself. I'll sit down anyway.
Good morning. My name is William Castro, Florida bar number 327980, and I'm the best criminal defense lawyer in Miami. I have a cartoon in my office that says, "I may have lost your case, but you had the pleasure of seeing me argue it." I love the practice of law because this is what I was born to do. I'm smart, I've got no problems, everyone thinks I'm a super all-around guy. And that's because I am. Now you're probably asking yourself, who is this guy? How did he get to be so full of himself? And why in the world did Professor Brachelargue invite him here today? Well, let me tell you about me. I was born in Havana, Cuba, and I came to the United States in 1960. And I was the perfect boy. Because you see, in 6th grade, I was anointed to be the captain of the safety patrol. A lot of people would have said, you know, I can't go any further in life than having reached that stature, but not me. I moved on to high school where I became the high school president. Many people just clamored around and said, you cannot go and be any more than you are today. But I had other aspirations. I applied to college, and I got accepted to Columbia College in New York City. And that's when people beyond Miami were telling me how special I was, because I soon learned how important you are if you are an Ivy Leaguer. After my 3rd year at Columbia undergrad in 1976, I decided that I wanted to find out if I wanted to go to law school. So I did some internship at the Public Defender's Office in Miami, and I became so in love with criminal defense litigation that I knew that that's what I wanted to be. Now, can you all guess what's better than a one-time Ivy Leaguer? A two-time Ivy Leaguer. So I studied law at the University of Pennsylvania. I enjoyed courses that I knew someday would make me a great criminal defense lawyer. That became my dream. Between my 2nd and 3rd year of law school, I did an internship now as a certified legal intern at the Public Defender's Office in Miami, and I tried my first felony case, and I, of course, obtained an acquittal. After graduating law school, I returned to the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office, where I was hired there. As a public defender, I was so confident I would be a successful attorney that within months of starting to work there, I purchased a black Porsche. Now, I could afford a high monthly payment on that kind of car because I lived at home and had no other expenses. I worked hard as a public defender. Almost immediately, private lawyers clamored to hire me. As if my ego needed any additional stroking, I was told repeatedly that I would be a great criminal defense lawyer. I only remained at the Public Defender's Office for 2 years. In September of 1982, I went out on my own after having resigned from the Public Defender's Office, and I accepted a position as an associate attorney at a prestigious private firm. While I knew that the safer route would have been to remain at the Public Defender's Office and get a little bit more experience, I felt compelled to make more money faster to help at home. I also did lack the confidence or the desire to work hard and realize my dream of becoming a great criminal defense lawyer. At this private law firm, I honed my litigation skills, and among the numerous cases that I tried, less than 2 years out of law school, I was assigned to be the lead counsel on a first-degree murder case with another associate in Fort Pierce, and we went up against the actual elected state attorney in that particular county. And after a 3-week trial, of course, we won. I also experienced the business side of practicing law. Just over 3 years out of law school, I learned how to promote myself to clients and how to collect fees. In the courthouse, I observed how political the court system was. Judges seemed to be always running for re-election, and lawyers constantly supporting them with donations. After only 11 months at the private law firm, I went out on my own. As a sole practitioner, I represented defendants charged with every single type of crime you could imagine under federal and state law, and tried many of them before a jury, and of course won. I took pride in my preparation and skills. When I filed the notice of appearance on behalf of a defendant, I wanted that prosecutor to know by looking at my name that they were in for a fight, albeit a fair one. I wanted to be tough, I wanted to be pleasant, talented, and known. My practice thrived and my ego grew. Now everybody knows that perfect boys become perfect men. I became board certified in criminal law in 1988 and even served as a paid part-time lecturer at the University of Miami. I had a matter on the calendar in the criminal courts practically every day. I enjoyed being known and respected by judges and attorneys alike. On December 8th, 1990, I married Mari in a church, not because we were practitioners of any faith, but to please our parents. Upon returning from our honeymoon, we lived at a condominium in Key Biscayne. Mari had no immediate plans of returning to her position as an assistant state attorney at the state attorney's office in Miami. At the age of 36, I had it all. My practice, my condominium on Key Biscayne, a red Porsche, turbo, candy red of course, and a beautiful wife. Now this is going to be the first interactive portion of this presentation. And what I'd like to see is, by a show of hands, is there anyone here today who would not have wanted to be me? Anyone? My philosophy of life could be summed up in one sentence. To receive, you have to take. I learned that growing up, I learned that in law school, and I learned that in the business world of practicing law. Now that doesn't mean that I was a bad guy. After all, I never hurt anyone. But what you saw was not always what you got. Because back then, I don't recall doing anything for anyone unless there was something in it for me. Being successful had its prices, literally. Judges or wannabe judges knew who had active practices and solicited campaign contributions for their judicial campaigns. Inevitably, I felt compelled to give a donation to just about everyone who ran for judge. In fact, sometimes I felt that I had to give to more than one candidate running for the same seat. I donated to judicial campaigns for two principal reasons. First, to not incur a judge's ire and avoid the possibility that he might take it out on a future client. And second, judges had unfettered discretion to appoint anyone they wanted to represent indigent defendants that were charged before them. In 1987, a high school friend of mine introduced me to a county court judge. They were starting a drug intervention rehabilitation program, and the judge was a part of this. And they wanted me to give a lecture on the legal consequences of being involved with drugs. So I decided to help out. And in the meantime, I got to know this person, and shortly thereafter, he told me that he was going to run for a circuit court judge position, being elevated from county judge. So he seemed like a nice guy, and so I said, sure, I'll help you out. He in fact ran, and he won. During the campaign, I helped him out with the maximum allowable contribution. I went to different places in the county and spoke on his behalf, and so he won. So after the election, as expected, he appointed me to represent several indigent defendants. Again, this was something that happened with all judges. It was a way of patronage that you helped them and they wind up appointing you. Nothing was ever said, nothing nefarious about it. It just simply occurred. At that time, my world was all about prestige and possessions. Who I knew was just as important as what I knew. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just unbridled ego. I was primed for temptation. Sometime in 1988, I was in the judge's courtroom, and he said to me, Willie, when the calendar is over, come on back and I want to meet with you in chambers. And there was nothing wrong with that. I mean, oftentimes judges and lawyers meet in chambers and just talk about just things, about life. When I went to his chambers, though, he asked me to step in the hallway. I will never forget what happened next. He told me he was having financial problems, which I knew, and he needed to make some extra money. He said that I could really help him out by accepting many court appointments from him and then giving him a percentage of the money I earned. So many thoughts raced through my mind. I was scared, yet I wondered why he would ask me. I told him I would get back to him. Now this is going to be the second interactive portion of this presentation. Hopefully we'll get a little bit better participation. Let me ask you all this. What was wrong with what the judge proposed, and what should I have done? Yes?
Everything was wrong with it. If you want specifically, the judge, if I have this right, was saying that if he would assign you cases or clients and you would give him a portion of the money that you get from those clients.
That's correct.
To be honest, other than walking out and just incurring the ire of just that particular judge, I don't know what else you could have done.
Anyone else?
I would report him. I mean, I would definitely make sure that if he's representing the people, to some extent, he should be punished if he's proposing you such method.
Same thing reporting.
I never spoke with anyone about the judge's proposal because I knew it was not right. I made sure not to mention it to Mari, my girlfriend at the time, because she would not understand business. However, the truth is that I knew Mari didn't like this man, and she would find it wrong. I thought about how I could say no to the judge. However, if I rejected his offer, I knew he would no longer perceive me as a friend. I rationalized that since he would have appointed me to these cases anyway because I had helped him in his campaign, I could do whatever I wanted with my money, right? I mean, I earned it. And since this arrangement would not affect how he ruled in any case, I analogize it to a referral fee to another lawyer. Except this was to a judge. Highly irregular, but if nobody found out, I figured nobody would be hurt. Lastly, if not me, somebody else would take the judge up on his offer. I chose me. Subsequently, I met with the judge and said yes to him. I do not recall whether it was a judge or myself who brought up including another attorney who I shared office space with. Nonetheless, I spoke to the other lawyer, and he also agreed to participate in this. Selfishly, it benefited me to get this other lawyer involved because he was always having problems paying his bills. The judge and I agreed that I would pay him 20 to 25% of the fees I earned in cash. The same arrangement would apply to the other lawyer. Periodically, I would meet the judge in his chambers or in a restaurant and give him the money from me and from the other lawyer. On Sunday, June the 8th, 1991, I woke up and saw the front page headline of the Miami Herald. It was reported that the homes of several judges had been searched in connection with a judicial corruption investigation named Operation Courtroom. The judge I spoke about was one of those judges. The story indicated that judges and attorneys had allegedly fixed the outcome of cases. I was surprised that this judge would be involved in fixing cases. I was very concerned. Within days, my world changed. The newspaper headline read, "U.S. probes why judges gave cases to 5 lawyers." I was one of those lawyers mentioned in a search warrant. I was now very scared. After the FBI contacted me, I sought legal advice from a longtime lawyer friend and disclosed everything to him. I broke down to Mari and confessed to her and apologized for having ruined her life. I also went to church and made a sacramental confession to the very priest who just 6 months ago previously had celebrated our marriage. At age 36, I could see losing everything that was important to me, all I had worked for. I was disgraced and had no one to blame except myself. I subsequently learned that both the judge and that lawyer were going to testify against me. I knew that meant I might lose my liberty. I felt I had no way out, no place to go, no future. Earlier I told you that everybody thought I was a super all-around guy. Let me share with you what some people really thought about me. I became acquainted with Willie Castro when he was under my supervision in the juvenile division of the Public Defender's Office many years ago. He was bright, charming, talented, and arrogant. I had the impression that he thought he knew it all and certainly couldn't learn anything from me. Willie tried cases, he was talented, but along with the talent was an appalling lack of humility and even empathy. I met Willie when he was a young, talented, and eager assistant public defender. The first thing that struck me about Willie was his passion. The second was his arrogance. I can't remember ever seeing a new trial lawyer with more potential than Willie. His skill, intelligence, diligence won him many rulings and trials. His cockiness did not win him friends. I knew as a lawyer he was good and would get even better. I was not so sure about him as a person. When I first encountered him, I was a newly graduated lawyer serving as an assistant state attorney in Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. Mr. Castro, in my eyes at that time, was a big deal in Miami's legal community. My professional encounters with him, though, were less than pleasant, as I found Mr. Castro at that time to be very arrogant, there's a theme here somewhere, and very willing to intimidate a young prosecutor during the litigation of a case. When I first met Willie, he was a defense lawyer and I a prosecutor. I did not care for him. He was arrogant and overbearing, God's gift to the legal profession. And let me share with you the last snippet. My impression of Willie was that he was a very good lawyer. Every time he impressed me and his lawyering skills. What did not impress me about Willie was Willie as a person. He struck me as arrogant, cocky, and overly concerned with being successful. He seemed to lack what might be termed spirituality. He seemed superficial. Having met Marty before Willie, I came to be fond of Marty prior to finding out that Marty was dating Willie. Marty struck me as the opposite of Willie as a person. So when I found out Marty was dating Willie, I remember thinking that she could do so much better. I did not believe that I could possibly descend any further, but I was wrong. What I shared with you is my public humiliation. Let me share with you a little bit of my private humiliation. I had a friend who called me right after the newspaper articles came out and said to me, Willie, I know you're a good Catholic, and I'd like for you to meet with a Catholic woman who's going to really give you some guidance. And I said, sure, great. He gave me her address. She lived in an apartment. So I got in my car, drove to her place, parked my car, knocked on the door. She opened the door. She asked me to sit at a table and to sit down. When I sat down, she took out some really, really weird-looking big cards, and she started throwing them on the table. And I just sat there. 5–10 minutes went by. And after 10 minutes, the only word she said to me was, everything's going to be okay. I got in my car. Back then, we had, when cell phones just came out, they looked like these military cell phones. So I carried it out to my car, and I called my friend. I said, dude, who did you send me to? He says, tarot cards. He says, no, I'm so sorry. He said, I have somebody else who's very Catholic that I want you to meet. I said, are you sure about that? Yeah, okay. So he gave me his address, and I went there, and I showed up. I knocked on the door. They let me in and asked me to sit at the table. And then the gentleman said, there's a towel right there. I need for you to go into the bathroom. There's a bucket of water there with rose petals. You need to get naked. You need to get the bucket of water with rose petals, pour it on you, and everything's going to be okay. The only thing I can tell you is that the water was really cold. I got out. I called my friend. I said, are you my friend or what? Who are you sending me to? He says, I got one more person for you. And I said, you sure? I said, three's a charm. So I got the address, I went there, drove, parked, knocked on the door, asked to sit at the dining room table. There's no towel, but I saw a big slab of raw meat that looked like it had been seasoned. So I figured, well, maybe I'm early for dinner, right? So he said to me, he says, what you need to do, he said, you need to go into the bathroom, take your clothes off, take this raw piece of meat, rub it all over you, put your clothes back on, and you need to go find a railroad tracks and throw it in the railroad tracks, and everything will be okay. In the southwest section of Miami, there's a ball field where there's a waste dump, and between these two major roadways, there's a railroad track that in the spring of '91, there was a Honda Civic that was driving up and down, up and down, up and down that street until there was no oncoming traffic, and a piece of meat flew out that window and landed right where it was supposed to be, between the railroad tracks. This was not my finest hour. My spiritual gauge read empty. I had truly reached rock bottom. But then I attended a real Catholic retreat called Emmaus. Well, I'm not here to speak to any of you about my spiritual conversion. It is why my life changed forever. At this retreat, God gave me two gifts. First, He gave me examples. He didn't simply give me a list of teachings, give me the Bible and say, here, go read it, figure it out. He gave me other men who really walked the walk in their life at home, in their life in the community, and with their families, and everywhere. I left that retreat wanting to go to meetings, to talk, and to listen to other Emmaus men on the team, because I wanted to have what those men had. That weekend, God also gave me community. I always did things alone. Left to my own devices, the odds of getting things right were never better than a coin toss. I never knew men actually got together and prayed together. I witnessed that prayer turn into service. I felt so part of a team that first Emmaus post-retreat gathering at Thanksgiving, how it made me feel to deliver turkeys to men and women in our community. Emmaus truly filled a large hole in my heart. However, just because I found God didn't mean that my problems went away. I was subsequently indicted in federal court and decided to exercise my constitutional right to a jury trial. I unrealistically hoped that everything might just go away, and having learned my lesson, I could just start over again. But in November of 1993, I was convicted of all the charges. In March of 1994, I was sentenced to 37 months in federal prison, followed by a 3-year term of supervised release. I was also ordered to forfeit and eventually did pay the $77,000 I earned from the illicit court appointments. I vividly recall, after hearing the jury say guilty 27 times and getting in my car and driving home and entering a Winn-Dixie, where it first hit me that I was a convicted felon. Based on my federal convictions, the Florida Supreme Court issued an order suspending me And then in 1998, the Florida Supreme Court approved an uncontested report of a referee to disbar me for 10 years. Now, while that 10-year disbarment gave me some hope that I might someday practice again, it was really the furthest thing from my mind. On January the 15th, 1997, I surrendered to the federal prison camp in Miami, Florida, to begin serving my federal prison term. I exchanged this card for this card, 38258-004. While in prison, I worked in a kitchen cutting vegetables and washing dishes, at a prison warehouse freezer, in a hotel at the Homestead Air Force Base, cleaning its lobby, and painting the outside of buildings, and in a food warehouse at the Crone Detention Center. Prison stripped me of whatever remaining vestiges of self-importance that I had. It was truly ground zero for me. I remember being outside on cold evenings with other inmates, looking up at the stars, playing spades, closing my eyes and opening them back up and seeing that I was still there. Nobody in his right mind can look forward to being incarcerated, but in retrospect, it served as the fine cleansing necessary to begin my new life. While I was blessed that God entered my life before I went to prison, I know most people are skeptical when they hear that someone has found God there. I discovered that the reason that that occurs is because an inmate has time to reflect, he has time to repent, and he has time to make plans to change his life. I knew my place in prison and respected all the rules and followed them, whether I agreed with them or not. Including the time I was assigned to a halfway house, I served 2 years, 8 months, and 21 days in federal custody. When I left prison, I was hired by a church member to work for a company which sold a variety of goods to United States embassies worldwide. Although I thought of maybe becoming an attorney one day, I chose to work for him because I really wanted to distance myself from not only what I had done, but also my time in prison. And I wound up working for that company for 5 years. Sometime in 2004, a civil attorney approached me through a church brother and asked me if I would be interested in maybe doing some paralegal work for him. And because my background was in criminal defense, I was a little wary about entering and working at a civil firm. But something that I quickly realized is that research is research and writing is writing. And I thought it was a good opportunity for me to work there because, one, it allowed me to begin honing my skills. But later on, when I left that particular private firm, I worked on my own and it allowed me to study for the bar exam, and I could better manage my time. I took bar review courses, and I was there sitting with men and women who were 25 years younger than me. They're all on laptops, and I'm taking notes the old-fashioned way, and I'm thinking there's got to be some advantage to the experience that I had. And the hard work paid off because I passed the Florida and multi-state portions of the exam with scores of 154 and 156, and I also obtained a 133 score on the NPRE, which I guess are both pretty good scores. So in the meantime, I got involved in community service activities. And one of the activities I became involved in was being a volunteer producer and host of a weekly and then daily radio show on the Catholic station in South Florida. And during one of those programs, we had a guest who talked to us about becoming foster parents. And that sounded just like an amazing thing to do. And that interested me because my wife and I, the problems that I had occurred 6 months after I became married. we decided to hold off having children until our troubles went away. But by the time that I came out of prison, we were no longer able to have our own children. So the thought of maybe becoming a foster parent was something that I felt that I needed to pursue. And I carried a great amount of guilt because of that. So we got licensed as foster parents, and almost immediately we got a call from the Department of Children and Families that they had a placement for us. It was a little boy that had been born 6 days before. And I remember it was at Friday night at 11:30 at night that a real big guy knocked on our door and said, "Here's the little baby." And we took him in, and it was so exciting that next day. Our house looked like either we were dealing drugs or we had a pyramid scheme, because everybody was coming and going. We named that little boy Pablito, and it was really exciting to see a little boy in our home. That Sunday, we got a call from the DCF worker who said, "Oh, by the way, we're doing a background on the maternal mother about a possible placement for that baby. So they might be taking, that child from us." And the following Tuesday, we got a call that Pablito was going to be taken back on Friday. I can only tell you how crushed I was, and certainly my wife, that was going to happen. And I remember when they came to pick him up that Friday, that I actually followed the worker to juvenile court to make sure that they were really removing him and not taking him elsewhere. We vowed that the next child that would come to our home would be a child that stays. We went through a few failed adoption opportunities, including one in which the birth mother had an abortion. She would have been my daughter. It's the first time that abortion had ever personally affected my life. Shortly